Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the College of Opticians of British Columbia's annual general meeting today. The meeting will be running till about 2 o'clock. My name is Rita Gupta. I'm your facilitator for today, and I'm a certified professional facilitator and have been facilitating, running meetings, training, conferences, symposiums, whatever, you name it, ever since the pandemic hit in March. So as a lot of you, I'm sure, have been catapulted into the virtual world. So the purpose of today's meeting is to provide the registrants with an update of what's happening at the College of Opticians of BC. And some of the outcomes you're going to have after today's meeting is to inform the registrants of regulatory changes and provide them with a financial update. Also to educate registrants on cultural safety and humility, which is going to be counted towards your continuing education. The agenda is shown on the screen, and all of you would have received this in your confirmation email as well. So as I said, we'll be going for about 90 minutes. Some rules of engagement. Please keep yourself muted at all times, just so we can minimize background noise. We've got about 50 people on the call, so we really want to make sure that we don't have any background noises. And a lot of you may be at home, and there's all sorts of things happening in everyone's household. Your video, please keep it off. We're going to have the board of directors have theirs on. And I'm just going to mute for a second. There's some background noise happening. Okay, there we go. And for the chat, we're recommending that you can use it in one of two ways. You can, if you have any technology questions, you can private chat with Chris. And also he's going to be the minute taker. And if you have any questions for any of the presentations or speakers, you can type them in the chat to me, and I'll be talking a little bit more about the questions in a minute. So the chat messages can only be sent to the hosts and the co-hosts. So that's myself, Chris, and Lisa. So questions, how we're going to handle questions today, because we have a large group. We have about 50 people on the call. So at the end of each speaker's presentation, there will be a little bit of time for question and answer. During the presentation, if a question comes to your mind and you don't want to forget it, please feel free to type it in the chat to me. And then after each speaker is finished, I will read out the questions from the chat to the speaker. We will try our best to get to every question, but in consideration of time constraints, we may not. And please keep in mind that the session is being recorded. Your chat messages will be saved. And the reason why we've turned this on is, as I just said, we may not get to every question based on the time constraints. So this way we will be saving the chat messages. And if we didn't get a chance to address your question, the college will reach out to you. Also, private chat has been disabled, so you will not be able to chat with one another. And we've also disabled the chat functionality for you to chat with everyone. Just in lieu of name tags, we're asking everyone if they want, they can rename themselves. And after their name, they can add in what city or what part of BC they're in. And that way you can see who else is on the call and in the meeting. And a quick way of seeing that is at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there's a participant icon. If you click on the participant button, and you see the list of all 50 people that are in this meeting, you can actually see who's here, and if they've added their location at the end, you can also see that in the participant window. And once again, if you have any questions on how to rename yourself and you're not able to find that option, please feel free to private message Chris. He's one of the co-hosts. So I've talked about myself, I've talked about the agenda for today, and just some housekeeping. Let's hear a little bit about you. So we want to find out where you, the registrants, are geographically located. So I'm going to launch a poll right now. So if you do not see this poll on your screen, it's because you're logged in through the web and not through your desktop application or a mobile app. So if I'm talking about a poll, and we're going to have several polls throughout today's session, if you're not seeing this one, chances are you're logged in through the web. So I'm just going to wait till a few more people fill in the poll. So we've got about 80% of the people have filled it in. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll. It's been almost a minute. And I'll share the results so all of you can see where everyone is from. So here's the breakdown. 88% are from the Lower Mainland. We've got 7% in the north and smaller percentages in the other two areas. Just so you know where your fellow colleagues are dialing in from. So I will stop share the results. So I'm going to now call Peter, the chair of the board of directors, to speak now and introduce the board.
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start with our traditional land acknowledgement. The College of Opticians of BC operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam nations. Given that we are all participating in this meeting from different areas, please take a moment to consider the land that you are currently on as well. And with that done, I do want to welcome everyone to today's AGM. My name is Peter Luongo. I reside in Burnaby by way of Langley, actually, Langley, BC. And it's been my honor to serve over the last year as the board chair. It's been a true privilege to work with this group of people and with the staff at Cobc. At this time, what I'm going to do is introduce each of our staff members, or sorry, each of our board members, and they're going to get highlighted and give you a big wave. Our vice chair and also financial officer is Kim McEachern.
So Kim's waving.
Good, yeah, good. We have Rahim Savja. Unfortunately, Rajman is not able to join us today. However, a public member, Piotr Majkowski, there is.
Also waving.
Yes, Eric Buchaneg.
So Eric, I don't think is on video. I think he's only dialed in with his phone.
He's waving violently, though. You can tell he's waving. Yeah, good.
Just picture it.
There you go. And another public appointee, Barbara Larkin. And Marty Semaniuk. And last but most certainly not least, Sue Rendawa. Sue has the really nice fashion glasses. You can tell that's an optician right there. Love it. So at this time, what I'm going to do is ask for an adoption of the agenda, and you can help me out if you could please in the chat box send that you'd like to move the agenda, and we could get a seconder. And once that's done, I'll ask for a vote of all our participants today.
And Peter, who do you want them to message?
To Lisa would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, do you need me to turn on the video? I'm Patrick Cheng.
Patrick, we're okay if you leave it dark. We're okay with that.
Okay, good. Okay.
Thank you. Patrick, did you want to move the agenda?
Move the agenda? Yes.
Good, Patrick, good. And a seconder?
I've got Stan.
Thank you, Stan, for seconding. All in favor? And
There's also reaction buttons that you can use that you can give a thumbs up as well.
Like this?
Yes, exactly.
Well done. Good.
You're on mute, Peter.
I don't know how that happened. We'll call
somebody may have muted everyone because there was some background noise. So every time, just check that you're unmuted.
Thanks a lot, Rita. So with that done, I'm going to go on to my report. And this is a time of change for all of us at Cobc at the College of Opticians for opticians, but for many of our health regulators. And as you can see by the slide, change gives us a chance, gives us an opportunity to look at things in a new way and with the hope that we can make them better. Rita, you could go to the next slide, please. In March of 2018, the Ministry of Health appointed Harry Caton to review and make recommendations regarding the Health Professions Act of BC. In April 2019, the Ministry of Health accepted the Caton report and formed an all-party steering committee on the modernization in health profession. Next slide, please. In August 2020, that steering committee put together a mandate. The mandate had 3 items included: to improve patient safety and protect the public, to improve efficiency and effectiveness of the regulatory framework, and to increase public confidence through transparency and accountability. Next slide, please. The proposed changes to the composition of health regulators included the reduction in number of colleges, not regulated professions, by the way, the colleges, from 20 down to 6. Opticians to be included in one of 2 multi-professional regulators proposed as the College of Allied Health and Care Professionals. Other members of the group that opticians have been included in are the dietitians, occupational therapists, optometrists, physical therapists, psychologists, and speech and hearing professionals. A 6th college was also identified as complementary and alternative health and care professionals. Next slide, please. The changes that have been made will affect us in a number of ways. We perceive them to be positive changes in that they allow us to regulate and to work together with other regulators to that end. And based on some of these changes, these are 2 significant changes. Appointments to boards and committees will no longer be based on elections. They will be based on competence, merit, and diversity. And there will be an increased representation of public members. Consideration given to further amalgamation of the 2 new regulators into one group. At this time, there is an attempt to look at the current alignment of those 2 additional groups, one of which includes the opticians, and to look at forming those 2 into one. There's a final recommendation that will go forward to the legislature for discussion and further consideration. So none of these changes will take place until a legislative decision is made, and that will then necessitate moving forward with changes. The College of Opticians Board and representatives will continue to communicate information as we receive it. Thank you, Rita.
You want to just introduce the poll?
So folks, this gives you a chance to let us know what you have known about health regulation, about the changes, and gives us some insight that we can use in our work moving forward as a board. Please take a few moments to fill it in.
So when I launch the poll, please keep in mind that there's actually 3 questions and you have to answer all 3. So you need to scroll down in your box. And once you've answered all 3, you can submit your answer. If for some reason you don't see the poll, it's because you've joined the call from the web instead of your desktop application or your mobile app. So if you've joined strictly through the web, you will not see the poll and you will not see the poll results.
Rita, for those who can't see the poll, would it be worthwhile in a few moments just to announce what the results are?
Yeah, I'll share them and then Peter, you can read them out. That would be
Excellent.
a great idea. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'm just going to wait a bit longer. We have less than 70% of people that have responded, so I'll just wait
Thank
a few
you.
more seconds.
Yeah. Thanks, Rita. Well, the last few people are filling in their answers. I did just want to mention that I've really appreciated the opportunity to work with the board this year. It's been a really good group to work with. I also want to thank staff, and in particular want to highlight Lisa Bannerman, our registrar's work. The commitment that she makes to the college is noteworthy for sure. During this year, the board, in fact, conducted its first assessment of her performance, and that performance review was completed here this last June. And we're delighted with the work that Lisa has done on your behalf, our behalf. I also want to highlight the great work done by so many committee members. There are a number of committees related to the work that we do at the college, and the committee members have been dedicated, professional members of the team. Thanks. I've got the results in front of me. The first question referred to how aware folks were of the proposed changes to regulatory framework. 23% were very aware, 51% were somewhat aware, 26%, a quarter of our group, were not aware at all. The second question, how aware are you of the statutory requirements of the college under the current Health Professions Act? 28% were very aware, 63% somewhat, and 9% not at all. And the last question, how aware are you of the important role that committees play in the work of the college? 47% very aware, 49% somewhat aware, 5% not at all. That last question is gratifying to see because it means that you folks are aware of the great work that the committees are doing. Thank you for responding to the poll. And Rita, at this time, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop sharing and just find out if there's, we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, I will just check the chat to see if any questions have been posed in there. I don't know if Lisa or Chris, any questions have been posed to you. If so, you can unmute yourself and let us know if there's any questions. So if you have any questions for Peter and you haven't entered them yet, you can open up your chat window and you can send your question to me directly, and then I will read it out to Peter. So I'll just wait a little bit to see if anyone has any questions. We have a quiet bunch today.
It's good. We must have answered the questions that would have been out there.
Exactly. Oh, there is a question that's come up. What is the feedback from other colleges?
And I'm going to give you a response to that from my perspective, but I would welcome Lisa or registrar to come in as well. I think that the majority of the other colleges are set and in place. And then, of course, there are the two groups, the fifth and sixth group. And there is some interest in looking at the groups 5 and 6 and bringing those two groups together, amalgamating the two into one complete group. And at this time, some of the colleges involved in those two groups have been in dialogue and discussion with looking towards perhaps making a recommendation to government that the two separate new groups become one. Lisa, did you want to add to that at all?
No, that's great, Peter. There's really nothing else that I can add to it at that point.
Great. Good question, by the way. Thank you for that.
Any other questions from the group? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, and Lisa's going to be doing her registrar report. So let me share my screen.
Okay.
And my question on this slide, this cartoon that you have up, Lisa, like, is that a picture of your husband?
No, he wishes he could grow hair like that.
Okay. was just curious.
Yeah, that's more what I look like actually if I let my
Okay.
hair go at the moment, but I just thought it was
Okay.
funny.
It is.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending our first completely virtual AGM for the College of Opticians in BC. As Peter noted in his update, in conjunction with our regular workload, the college will be working closely with the other health profession regulators in BC to achieve the Ministry of Health's vision for modernization of regulation. While these changes will be complex and challenging, we look forward to working with our colleagues to positively influence the future of health profession regulation in BC. Next slide, please, Rita. So along with the uncertainty associated with regulatory reform, COBC staff, board, committees, and all of our registrants have also had to deal with a global pandemic. A huge thank you to all the staff for their ability to adjust so quickly to a new working environment, as the college cannot function without you, and it's not possible to put our work on hold. All staff continue to work from home, and we anticipate that this will continue at least on a partial basis well into 2021. While our ability to regulate has not suffered significantly during the pandemic, I know that many of our registrants have experienced major challenges. And yet, despite these, most opticians in BC that I've spoken with have indicated they've been able to adapt their practice and offer the safe, essential services that the public has required during this global crisis. From the patients that I have spoken to, the messaging has been clear that there is a strong public need for licensed opticians and that you are valued for your professional expertise and knowledge. So please do not forget this. I thank you for your dedication to the public and for your resilience during this difficult and often confusing time. Though the frequency of communications related to the pandemic has slowed, if new or additional direction is communicated by the provincial health officer, the college will notify everyone as quickly as possible. I would like to remind all opticians that they need to assess their practices and develop and post a COVID-19 safety plan for the public and for staff using the guidelines provided by WorkSafe BC. This will assist your practice in determining the services that you will be able to deliver safely based on risk, as each practice is unique and not one set of requirements will work for everyone. As a reminder, all of our communications may be found on our website under the COVID-19 tab, or you may contact us at any time if you have any questions. Next slide, please, Rita. As for other updates, December 31st of this year marks the completion of the first cycle of registrants in the new quality assurance program. We'd like to remind all opticians that if they require assistance, we're happy to help anytime, as we know that change can be a bit scary and confusing. We've had feedback from many opticians to date expressing appreciation for the flexibility and learning options that the new program provides. For all of you listening today, I would like to remind you that this session alone provides an opportunity to develop at least 2 learning goals. One that I would really like to see each optician in BC have in their plan would be staying up to date with regulation for opticians. Listening to this AGM alone is not maybe enough to close that entire goal, but if you do develop a learning goal about regulation, some activities could include reading the newsletter every month, attending the AGM like this, reviewing the proposal for modernization of health profession regulations that Peter has referred to, and reviewing the standards of practice, regulations, and bylaws for the college. You could have this same goal in each 3-year cycle. Later in our session today, Victoria from the college is going to provide a brief introduction to Indigenous cultural safety and humility. This is a topic that is now required to be addressed by legislation in BC, and there are a number of activities that can be added to a learning goal to support this, and we will give you further information on that during her presentation. Also, really separate from this specific session, another good topic for a learning goal that could be pandemic planning and awareness. Every optician has had to modify their practice, read and understand and interpret the various communications coming from the college, the provincial health officer, the BC Centers for Disease Control, and WorkSafe BC. Opticians have been tasked with reviewing their existing infection control plans and to adjust these to meet the current situation. Many of you may have also had to develop a COVID-19 safety plan using the template provided by WorkSafe BC. There are specific competencies that address occupational health and safety, which could easily be used to complete a goal on this timely topic. Next slide, please, Rita. So for my last little point today in my update, I wanted to just talk about complaints. So one of the major statutory requirements of the college is the investigation and disposition of complaints. Over the past few years, reporting of complaints has increased, and that's not just common to us, but to all health professions in BC and across the country as well. As the public becomes more aware of the role of regulators, we expect that this trend will continue. In particular, this past year, we've experienced an increase in complaints related to automated refracting. In most cases, the issue is refractions that are being performed outside of the limitations specified in the optician's regulations. I encourage all registrants who are certified in automated refraction to review these regulations. Again, this could be a learning goal, hint, hint. The limitations specified are not guidelines. They are legislated requirements that must be adhered to. We have a learning module to explain the limitations and regulations for automated refracting coming in sometime in late spring 2021. While the college has a responsibility to act if public protection could be at risk, please know that regulatory action is only taken when necessary. Education is always the preferred approach to assist opticians in understanding and addressing the concerns that have been raised by the public, other opticians, or in some cases, other regulated health professionals. In closing, the College of Opticians of BC has many projects underway that will modernize how opticians in the province and across Canada are regulated. And we look forward to sharing updates on these with you in our newsletters, our annual report, and at future board meetings. Thank you again for attending today, and I am happy to address any questions that you may have at this time.
I'm just going to add myself to the spotlight. So there's 2 questions that have come through.
Okay.
So one of them is not sure if the question is appropriate or not, so you can let us know. How much did Essilor pay to deregulate eyeglasses?
Oh, I really can't address that topic. I
Okay.
wasn't here at the time, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's how the process happened.
Okay.
But what I can say is one thing that does drive me a little bit nuts is, and that's not how this was worded, but I often hear people say that the profession has been deregulated. And that is not the case. Opticians are a regulated profession, and to use the title optician, you must be regulated and registered with the college. What the change was to the regulations was that the restricted activity of dispensing eyeglasses was made unrestricted. And it is not uncommon for some regulated health professions to have absolutely no restricted activities. So all I can say is that, you know, it's the activity itself, but you as a professional are still a professional. And the public expects for you to be regulated and have the training and expertise to do that role.
Thank you. Another question is just, will this AGM be available to people who could not attend live?
Yeah, we are recording it, so we will make sure that we post it and send out a note that it is available for everybody to watch.
Okay. I'll just wait a few seconds to see if there's any other questions. I don't know, Chris or Lisa, if anyone's messaged you in the chat with any questions. Those are the only 2 I've received. If you have any other questions for Lisa, please open the chat window and type them in.
Nothing else coming in at my end.
Just message everyone and just ask them. Okay, I think there aren't any other questions coming in. So the next topic on our agenda is actually the auditor's report. So I'm going to now bring up Jade Tien, who's our auditor, and she's going to be giving you her report.
Thank you, Rita. Just let me share my screen here. There we go. All right, can everyone see my screen?
I can.
Perfect. So you can all see the statements. Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, members, staff, and board of directors. My name is Jade, and I'm one of the partners from McLaren Treffitt & Co. My firm has audited the financial statements of the college, and we are extremely grateful for the tremendous support from the management and staff of the college. In our opinion, the financial statements present fairly all material respects the financial position of the college as at March 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations and cash flow for the year ended in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for not-for-profit organizations. I will touch on the highlights, so please direct your questions to Rita and I'll answer them after my report. Also, throughout my report, I'll mention the page numbers for those of you looking at the statements directly. Now we're going to look at page 4, the statement of operations. The college had $670,913 of revenue, which is about 11% higher than the prior year. The revenue sources are consistent with the prior year, with the exception of the government grant. The BC Ministry of Jobs, Trades and Technology provided a grant to improve the existing prior learning assessment and recognition process. This additional information about this grant is actually available in note 6 on page 8 of the financial statement. So if you're interested in knowing more about this or have questions about it, it's actually in note 6. Towards the bottom of the page, you will also see total expenses, $620,634. This expenses is about 8% higher than the prior year. However, as there is a greater increase in the revenue than the increase in the expenses, the college had a surplus of $50,279 at the end of the year. If we now look at page 3 of the statement, for the statement of financial position, it has an overview for the assets, liabilities, and net assets. The total assets, $961,851, less the total liability, $641,782, will leave the college net assets total of $320,069. Of the net assets, you'll see a bigger number, the $317,873. This represents the balance of unrestricted surplus that the college has accumulated over the years. This is the end of my report or the highlights. Do we have any questions? Any questions, Rita?
I haven't. No, there hasn't been any questions that have come up in the chat. I think you're just leaving your screen share on so that people can maybe point to exactly what they have a question on, which I think is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just wait and see if any questions come up. So there is a question here. What was the increase in legal fees for?
Give me a second here. Let me go to the expenses here. The legal fees, they were basically the lawyer fees assisting with the complaints.
So related to the complaints that were
Mm-hmm.
that came into the college.
Yeah, Lisa actually kind of went over those complaints a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we had significant increase in requests for needing legal assistance based on the complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Another question has come in. Is there going to be a lowering of the annual fee?
That I will probably pass the question to Lisa.
Hence, I've added her to the spotlight. Thank you for that. No, at this point in time, I don't see that we can lower fees. Yes, we did end up with a little bit of a surplus last year, but we still don't have, truthfully, what I would consider to be a comfortable surplus in the event that we had, any kind of a major issue. That could be a very large complaint, multiple large complaints that go to discipline. Our cushion, that contingency amount that we have saved up over the years, is actually quite small in comparison to what most organizations like ours would have. So at this point in time, I can't see any kind of a reduction in fees.
Okay, no other questions have come in. Let me just wait a few seconds. Okay, there isn't any other questions coming in. So Jade, you can stop sharing
Sure.
your screen.
Perfect. All right, so if there are no more questions, I just want to say lastly, on behalf of McLaren Trefinenco, I wish you and your loved ones great health and stay healthy and safe.
Thank you, Jade.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next agenda item is we have Indigenous Cultural and Safety Humility Training, and this is going to be delivered by Victoria, and she is the Manager of Communications and Patient Relations at the college. And she's going to be sharing her screen, and I'm going to spotlight her. So welcome, Victoria Spooner.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, I shall get started. So thank you all so much for attending the AGM today. It's really lovely to see so many people showed up on a Tuesday afternoon. My name is Victoria Spooner. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Manager of Communications and Patient Relations here at the college. I've put together a short presentation for you today to introduce you to the topic of Indigenous cultural safety and humility and how it relates to your role as a licensed optician. I'm aware that for some of you that this may be a relatively familiar topic, and for others this may be one of the first opportunities that you've taken to learn more about it. So wherever you are along your learning journey, I hope that this will give you some useful information and be a good basis for you to build upon with your own learning and practice. Okay, so before we get into the presentation, I'd like to suggest the following for how we can show up today: that we listen with empathy and humility and keep an open mind, that we ask courageous questions in the chat, which we can answer for you at the end of this presentation. If you don't understand something, chances are that somebody else doesn't either. So asking for clarity may benefit someone else. So I do encourage you to ask anything that comes to mind. If you don't feel comfortable asking things in the chat, you're very welcome to email me at the end and I will put my email up later. I ask you to be open to being challenged and willing to unlearn. Often we have a set of knowledge or beliefs that we have picked up along the way that may need to be unlearned before we can relearn a new way of thinking. That can sometimes be uncomfortable, so I ask you to stay with the process. And finally, I ask that we work on decolonizing our relationships with each other. So even though I'm sharing this presentation with you today, I'm not an expert on this topic. I am still learning as well. And the most effective way that we can make positive change is by learning from each other and growing together. So I encourage you to do that today and maybe take this into all areas of your life. It's a good way to be. So I'd like to share and explain some of the terminology that you will hear today. Eurocentric, this means implicitly regarding European culture as superior, focusing on it to the exclusion and detriment of other cultures. Colonization is the act of owning or appropriating a place or domain for one's own use. Decolonization is the action or process of a state withdrawing from a former colony, leaving it independent. We also use it as a conceptual term, such as decolonizing our relationships or decolonizing our minds, to unlearn Eurocentric ways of being that have been harmful to Indigenous peoples and make space for other ways of doing things. Systemic and institutional racism. This is a form of racism that is embedded as practice within society or an organization or a system. It is then upheld, whether consciously or not, by the individual actions of those who participate in that system. So in healthcare, that is all of us. We often carry unconscious bias, and that is why it is so important for us to do our individual and personal work on this topic so that it will affect the bigger system. Some respectful terminology. Since 2007, the term Indigenous has been considered most appropriate over Aboriginal, Native, and of course, Indian. Indigenous encompasses First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We use the plural Indigenous peoples over people as it acknowledges the extensive differences between cultures, spiritual beliefs, practices, and languages. British Columbia alone is home to 198 First Nations, and 7 of Canada's 11 unique language families are located exclusively in BC. We use the term reserve, not reservation, and Indigenous peoples in BC versus BC's Indigenous peoples. So a little bit about what to expect from this presentation. First up, we're going to do a land acknowledgement. Then we're going to talk about what Indigenous cultural safety and humility is and how it relates to your work as an optician. Then I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of colonial history in Canada and its effects. We'll be talking a bit about your responsibility as a licensed optician and how you can learn to make positive changes to your own practice. And finally, I'll be taking you through some of the work we've been doing at the college and some plans for our future. Now, I understand we've already had a land acknowledgement today, but it is important to keep reminding ourselves so that it doesn't just become something we say, but provides a foundation for the continued work that we do. So with that in mind, I'd like to acknowledge that the College of Opticians of British Columbia operates on the traditional, the ancestral, and the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, particularly the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam First Nations. We use the term traditional to recognise how land was traditionally used or occupied by First Nations. We use ancestral to recognise that land is handed down from generation to generation. And we use unceded to recognise that the land was not turned over to the Crown by a treaty or other agreement, so it is stolen land. And I just want to share this website with you today. So it's a fantastic resource for finding names of Indigenous territories across Canada. So after this meeting, I encourage you to take a look at where you are and find out the local Indigenous nation, if you don't already know. The map now encompasses all of Turtle Island, or the Americas, and Australia and New Zealand. So that's pretty cool. Okay, first up, let's do another poll. I'd like you to just share this one with them, Rita, if you can, the first one. So the question I'd just like to know is how familiar you are with Indigenous cultural safety and humility, and as it relates to your role as an optician. Now, there is absolutely no wrong or right answer to this at all. I'm just really interested to where you all are at with this topic.
And just a reminder again, if you are connected through the web only, you will not see the poll.
Excuse me.
So we've got about 75% response. I'll just wait a few more seconds.
Thank you.
I like to use the analogy of popcorn. I don't hear any more kernels popping, so.
Okay, this is good. Okay, so about half of you are somewhat familiar, which is kind of what I was expecting. And then a really good split between not familiar at all and very familiar. So that's really interesting. Thank you for answering that, everyone. Okay, so what is Indigenous cultural safety and humility? In 2017, the College of Opticians and 22 other healthcare regulators in BC signed this declaration to commitment to Indigenous cultural safety and humility. It was in agreement with the First Nations Health Authority and means that we've made a promise to do what we can with the work that we do as regulators to improve the safety of Indigenous peoples accessing healthcare. We've integrated this into our strategic plan, which means that we've deliverable goals that we can hold ourselves accountable to and which can help guide how we deliver on this commitment. Alongside the declaration, there are other legislations and commitments made by the federal and provincial governments establishing their commitment to this work. First of all, the rights of Indigenous peoples have been recognised in federal Canadian legislation since 1982 in Section 35 of the Constitution Act that states the existing Aboriginal and treaty rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada are hereby recognised and affirmed. In 2019, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP, was officially adopted by the BC government, and Bill 41, the UNDRIP Act, was passed. This act requires the government to take all measures necessary to ensure the laws of British Columbia are consistent with UNDRIP and to prepare and implement an action plan to achieve the objectives of this declaration. By doing this, the BC government is committing to adopting a decolonial lens to the work they do. As COBC is an organisation whose work is mandated by the government, it's useful for us to be aware of this greater commitment and ensure that we are incorporating this lens also. Finally, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a component of the Residential School Settlement Agreement from 2007, which was the largest class action settlement in Canadian history, produced a report containing the account of thousands of residential school survivors from across the country. From this report, they made 94 calls to action to assist with reconciliation, and 7 of which are specifically related to healthcare. So what is cultural humility? Cultural humility is a process of self-reflection to understand personal and systemic biases and to develop and maintain respectful processes and relationships based on mutual trust. Cultural humility involves humbly acknowledging oneself as a learner when it comes to understanding another's experience. Cultural safety is the outcome based on respectful engagement that recognises and strives to address power imbalances inherent in the healthcare system. It results in an environment free of racism and discrimination where people feel safe when receiving healthcare. So in this context, cultural humility is a practice that we do that will hopefully lead us to cultural safety. So how did we get here? This is the question that we must ask at this point. Why do we need to work on cultural safety? So in this section, we're going to take a look at a very short introduction into colonial history in Canada and how the effects of it can still be felt today, hopefully helping us to understand why Indigenous cultural safety and humility is an important focus for us and for you as licensed opticians. The following video contains facts about the colonisation of Indigenous peoples in Canada. Please be advised that this includes information about sexual, physical, emotional, and spiritual abuse, violence, and cultural genocides. This content will be upsetting. I encourage you to sit with your discomfort if you are a settler, as it is part of the process of cultural humility. There is no growth without discomfort. However, if you feel distressed or triggered at any time, please feel free to step away from the presentation. You are encouraged to seek support from a licensed mental health professional, friends, or family if you need to. If anyone on this call identifies as Indigenous and this is triggering for you, there is a 24-hour helpline that you can access, which is up on the screen now. So please feel free to take a photograph of that and save it for later if you need to. You can also drop a direct message to Rita. She has the number, she can post it in the chat as well.
I just posted it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm just going to switch my screen over now.
Reconciliation. It's a word you often hear, especially when discussing the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. But in light of recent events, some aren't sure they even want to talk about reconciliation anymore. When a 15-year-old Anishinaabe girl was found dead, dumped in a river and no one was held responsible, and a young Cree man was shot dead and the shooter was acquitted. Both of these recent cases have re-exposed a deep rift between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. It's a divide that goes back hundreds of years. When Europeans arrived in North America and began settling the land, they didn't stop at just taking land from Indigenous peoples. They brought with them a policy to snuff out the so-called Indian problem. The first Indian residential schools started opening in the 1870s. It's the beginning of what some have called the darkest chapter in Canadian history.
What took place in residential schools amounts to nothing short of cultural genocide.
By 1920, the Indian Act was amended to make it mandatory for status Indian children to attend residential school. When their parents refused to send them away, police showed up and forcibly took them. It's estimated that 150,000 children were taken from their families and placed in these schools where they were stripped of their culture and their language. The goal was assimilation, to quote, kill the Indian in the child. Thousands of children died, with some estimates saying the mortality rate was as high as 60% in some of the schools. Those who survived have shared horrific stories of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. The last residential school closed in 1996. And the impacts of those institutions are still palpable today. Indigenous communities have shown incredible resilience in the centuries since Europeans arrived, but the impacts of intergenerational trauma and colonization still run deep. In 2007, the largest class action settlement in Canadian history recognized the damage inflicted by residential schools. Canada formally apologized the following year.
These objectives were based on the assumption that Aboriginal cultures and spiritual beliefs were inferior and unequal. Indeed, some sought, as was infamously said, to kill the Indian in the child. Today, we recognize that this policy of assimilation was wrong, has caused great harm, and has no place in our country.
The residential school settlement agreement established a multi-billion-dollar fund to support survivors in their recovery. One of the outcomes of this agreement was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The commission traveled across the country and heard testimony from thousands of residential school survivors. In 2015, the commission produced its final report. It included 94 calls to action, calls meant to redress the legacy of the residential school system and hopefully lead to reconciliation. So what's changed since then? Some ask if this country has even grasped the truth of our shared history. What actions have been taken? How far have we come? Indigenous people currently account for roughly 5% of the population, and yet nearly half of all the children in care in this country are Indigenous. More than a quarter of the adults locked up in prisons are Indigenous. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls may be well underway, but the deaths and disappearances continue today. It's time to take a hard look at this country's progress on reconciliation.
Okay, thank you very much for paying attention to that video. As touched upon in this video, these events created lasting and devastating effects on the welfare of Indigenous peoples in Canada. The evidence of this is illustrated in the following. According to a 2000 report from the Canadian Institute of Health, suicides among First Nations youth aged 15 to 24 was about 5 to 6 times higher than non-Aboriginal youth in Canada. 52.2% of children in foster care are Indigenous, but account for only 7.7% of the child population, according to the Census 2016. Indigenous people account for roughly 5% of the population in Canada. They now account for more than 30% of the federal inmate population, and this number has continued to increase in recent years. And this is a figure from the Correctional Investigator of Canada, Ivan Zinger, from this year. Our systems, such as criminal justice, education, social and healthcare, were built upon the foundations of colonisation and are structured in Eurocentric colonial ways. By failing to address this, violence against Indigenous peoples continues to be enacted within these systems. In the last few months, Health Minister Adrian Dix requested an independent inquiry into reports of anti-Indigenous racism occurring in hospital emergency rooms across the Lower Mainland. We also saw the death of Joyce Ichakwan, a 37-year-old Atikamekw woman from Quebec, who live-streamed the racist abuse that she received from medical staff at a hospital immediately prior to her death. While these specific incidents occurred in hospital settings, we know from testimonies of Indigenous peoples accessing all forms of healthcare that racism, discrimination, and violence towards them is prevalent across the board, and often results in traumatizing experiences and receiving improper care. Opticianry is not exempt from this. The following quotes were taken from a focus group conducted by the First Nations Health Authority last year and relate specifically to Indigenous people's experience of visiting opticians. When we choose glasses, the optician tells us that we can only get certain frames and directs us to the Indian Affairs glasses, which are ugly. It is an embarrassing experience and it makes us want to walk out of the store. I haven't seen a vision provider in a long time because of cultural safety issues. I don't have trust for opticians. So now let's talk a little bit about what you can do as licensed opticians to regain and build that trust and become culturally safe practitioners. We have another poll for you right now. So Rita, if you could show my second one. So I'd just really like to know if any of you have ever completed any studies or training related to Indigenous studies. This includes attending any education events or any online courses.
I'll just wait a bit longer. We got about 70% is the response rate.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to end the poll in about 4 seconds. There you go, Victoria. You can read out the
lovely,
result.
thank you. Yeah, so 59% of you haven't previously completed any training, but 41% of you have. So it's almost a halfway split. It's pretty good, interesting results. Thank you for taking part. Okay, so what is your role as a licensed optician? Let's just recap. So as a licensed optician, you are recognised as a regulated health professional under the Health Professions Act in British Columbia. This signifies to your patients that you have received appropriate education, successfully completed the licensing examination, and that you continue to meet all ongoing requirements of the College of Opticians of British Columbia. Being a registrant of COBC signifies to the public that you are competent and can be trusted to provide safe healthcare services. So what does taking responsibility as a licensed optician look like when it comes to Indigenous cultural safety? So as previously mentioned, education and understanding is really the key to cultural humility, and it's actually not as hard as it sounds. All you need to do is just take some time to learn. And there are loads of amazing resources out there. I do specifically want to mention the Provincial Health Services Authority, SANYAS, Indigenous Cultural Safety and Humility Training, which is a course built specifically around this topic with the First Nations Health Authority. There are a few variants of the course available for you to take, including a healthcare provider specific one. There's lots of other resources as well, such as books, articles, courses, podcasts, YouTube, even Instagram has some really brilliant accounts that share great bite-sized pieces of information. I have collected some of these for you and a resource page on our website, which I've linked here. I will continue to build this resource by adding any new sources that we find. But if you come across anything that you think would be useful for other opticians, please do let me know. I'd really appreciate any input from anybody else that has found some great resources. You can also incorporate this into your continuing competency plan, as Lisa mentioned earlier on in her presentation. If you would like to do that, the competency that would relate to that directly for the meantime anyway is competency 1.1, professionalism and ethics. So you can see in here, we've been able to include a practice illustration about history, a practice illustration related to learning about the history of the effects of colonization on Indigenous peoples in Canada as the last 2 points under the practice illustrations column there. But I would say that even if this competency didn't come out as one that you need to work on through your CGA, we still highly encourage that you incorporate this topic into a learning goal. So what have we been up to here at COBC in relation to this topic? So our responsibility, we take our responsibility for our own learning very seriously. And today we've just made it mandatory for all staff, board and committee members to complete the Sannyas training. So far, all of the staff have completed it and about 50% of our board members have as well. We continue to share communications about Indigenous cultural safety and humility through our website, newsletter, social media, including land acknowledgements on all of our communications. This encourages awareness and opens up conversations with our stakeholders. We research and pursue opportunities for Indigenous cultural safety education. We are going to be surveying opticians courses to find out what foundational information is provided to trainee opticians and to know where we can help with that. We've already this year presented to Stenberg College students, which were for the first time, which was really successful. And we'll also be surveying registrants at renewal and registrants that are signing up for as new applicants as well, to learn a bit more about other opportunities that we can provide education. We're going to continue to develop ways of incorporating this into CCP to ensure continuous learning and growth. And we'll, as you may know, we'll be amalgamating with several other healthcare regulatory colleges, and commitment to cultural safety has been recommended as the #1 priority by the steering committee for modernisation of regulation. So this will continue to be an important focus for us as we move through that process. And we really do look forward to continuing this work with our colleagues. All right, so I've just got one last question for you before we wrap up. So Rita, if you could share that for me. So after this presentation today, I'd just really like to know, are you going to continue to seek out information about the effects and the history of colonisation and do some work on Indigenous cultural safety? I'd love to know.
We got about a 75% response rate, so I'll wait a bit longer.
Thank you.
Almost 80%. So I will stop the poll and share the results.
All right, so 84% of you say that you will, which is fantastic. 11% maybe and 4% no. All right, thank you so much for your time and attention today. I hope that this was informative and that you're inspired to dig into some learning now. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And myself and the rest of the team will do our best to answer for you. And my email is also up here, and please feel free to send me an email directly as well. Thanks. I'll stop sharing. Cheers.
Yes, I'll add myself to the spotlight.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Victoria, for that very educational presentation. So I'm just going to see what's in the chat here. So one of the questions was, what is the difference between reserve and reservation?
Oh, reserve is just the grammatically correct word.
Okay.
As simple as that, really. Yeah.
Okay. And somebody messaged that they were surprised that the last reservation school closed in as late as 1996.
Yeah, that one, it does always surprise people, that fact. Yeah.
What else has come through? Somebody has said, very informative, Victoria, thank you.
You are welcome, thank you.
Somebody else has said the University of Alberta has free 12-lesson course called Indigenous Canada.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That is on our resource page as well. I've linked to it, so you can go and find that. Thank you to whoever shared that.
That was Heather from Kelowna.
Thank you, Heather.
If there's any other questions, please type them into the chat. I'll just wait a bit to see if anyone has any. Even if there's any questions from the board or from the other staff that are on the call. So when somebody said, can you please repeat about the course? So what they said was that the University of Alberta has a free 12 lesson course called Indigenous Canada. And I think Victoria mentioned that it is on the college's website under the cultural safety page. Correct?
Yeah. And if you just Google University of Alberta Indigenous, it's like the first thing that comes up. So it's easy to find.
How accessible is training for our profession to the Indigenous population? And do we know representation of Indigenous opticians?
Great question. We don't know the facts about diversity within the optician population at the moment. That is something we will hope to include in the survey that we'll put out in renewal to try and gain some of that information. In terms of being accessible to Indigenous people's training, there isn't anything I think that's particularly geared towards Indigenous people, but all the optician courses are obviously open and available. I feel like maybe Kim or Lisa might have something else to add to that. If you do, please go ahead. Maybe not. Okay.
Lisa, if there's anything that she's saying no, she doesn't have anything to add. Okay, I'll see if there's any other questions. I also did copy and paste the information about the University of Alberta. I just put it into the chat so everyone can see it actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just such an still a new topic for most people, and it's not something that we've really explored. So I think it is still an area that we're all learning about and don't have enough definite answers or information to be able to answer that question at this point.
But the conversations are starting, right? So that's, I think, the thing that we should all be grateful for.
And I would like to stress that we are very far ahead of our other counterparts in the rest of the country in our, training and what we're doing on this topic. So we're continuing to work on that nationally as well.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll just wait and see if there's any more questions that come through. So the question has come through. This question is regarding the title optician and licensed optician. Shouldn't professional opticians retain their title of optician regardless if they keep their license or not? Their title may not be licensed optician, but optician should be allowed. So I think this might be more geared towards Lisa.
Yeah.
I'm going to add Lisa to the spotlight. You're muted.
I thought I was not muted.
It happens every time.
I know. It's a fair question. Under our regulations in BC, it's very specific that to use the title optician, you must be registered with the college. That's basically the way the regulations are worded. So you may take training to be an optician, but to hold yourself out to the public as a licensed professional, regulated professional, of which the title optician is included just as it is without the word licensed in front of it, you do have to be a registered member of the college.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Given restrictions on travel, do Indigenous populations on reserve still have access to eye care, healthcare right now?
That's a great question. I can't answer to all of that actually, but I do know we did have one optician. I think he may have retired now. One of our licensed opticians was actually working with an optometrist, going to remote Indigenous communities to actually offer eye care. So there are There are opportunities for that out there. People are doing that. It may be something that that more people could do, more opticians could get involved in. That's not something I don't think that we would necessarily have a part in organising. But this person did it on their own with an optometrist. So I know that did exist, and probably still is going. He's retired, like I say, but I'm sure that service is still being offered.
Okay, thank you. I'll just see if there's any other questions that come in. The one comment, I think, is my parents come from colonized regions, so I've always been aware of the effects. Plus, in my grade 5 class, the teacher focused on Indigenous tribes for the whole year.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
It's great that you got that education.
And somebody else is also saying, you know, the presentation that you gave, Victoria, was really great.
Thank you very much.
Further to the question on title protection, is the college continuing to ensure the title is not used by individuals who are not licensed?
This was originally going to be part of my my registrar's report, and of course now I don't have the stats in front of me. We did like an audit. Would have been the year that I started, so 2020, end of 2017, early 2018, and there were quite a large number of instances of unauthorized title use. We took care of all of those that we were aware of, and this year when we did a new audit, unfortunately it was right during the start of COVID. I think the results, it was roughly 50% less.
So I have some stats here that someone's typed in. So 117 in 2017, and then 61 in 2020.
There you go. And of those 61 in 2020, we haven't looked into all of them yet or taken action on them, but we know that quite a few of them were people who they were in the process of renewing. It was when COVID happened, and so some of them have automatically taken care of themselves. But yes, we do continue to do this. It's a huge amount of work to do these audits, and we rely on, you know, other opticians to give us that information as well if they're aware of incidents of unauthorized title use.
So just so you know that those numbers were given by one of the staff members, Megan Marsh, the manager of inquiry and registration. So just so people know, it wasn't just some random person giving the stats. It was from a college staff member.
She was the one who'd given them to me, and then I decided I didn't have enough time in my report today.
You did.
There we go.
The people want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think there's any more questions coming in. So thank you once again, Victoria, for your presentation. I'm going to remove your spotlight, and then we'll continue with our agenda. So I'm going to be asking Peter actually to come back, and I'll just share my screen to make an announcement.
Thanks, Rita. As you're bringing up the screen, I too want to just echo the sentiments out there. Victoria, an excellent presentation, very informative, and obviously stimulated some good conversation and questions from the group. So thank you again. So ladies and gentlemen, we have board elections coming up. There are 2 positions available for the Lower Mainland District. Eligible registrants in that area may vote online between December 1 and 31. So the date is coming very shortly. Instructions will be emailed to eligible voters. Currently, there are 3 nominees: Carl Chua, Kim McEachern, and Lila Nouri. Thank you for putting your names forward. And we do encourage our registrants to make sure that they participate in the voting process. And as per the earlier discussion, this won't be a practice moving forward, but this year we do continue with the elections. In the future, it'll be by appointment.
So I'm going to ask, I think, Lisa to join the spotlight again. So let
Yes.
me just spotlight her.
Thank you. We'd like to make a point of saying a big thank you to a couple of our committee members who are not members of the board as well. They are standalone committee members. For all of you, just for your interest, our committees are made up, it's specified in our bylaws, our committees have to be a combination of elected board members, appointed public board members, and registrants at large. So these three are finished their terms and are not renewing. Two are not eligible to renew because they've done enough time, and the third has decided she is finished. And that would be Dee. She's done 9 years on various committees. Most recent was with the Inquiry Committee, and so I would really like to thank Dee for her time and her commitment. We'd also like to thank Michelle McLeod for 6 years on the Quality Assurance Committee. That, again, a huge amount of work, especially with the changes that have occurred to our quality assurance program over the last few years, and all of the work that went into planning and working on that. And same with Claudia Roja. She is also Quality Assurance Committee and was involved again in the entire process of the new program. And I would also like to just point out that Claudia is also your representative to the BC chapter for the Opticians Association of Canada. So completely different organization than the college. The Opticians Association of Canada is your advocacy body. So for any of you who have questions, concerns about what things relate to you as a professional and your ability to do your job as a professional and the profession in general, Claudia is the person that you should be contacting. So thank you, Dee, Michelle, and Claudia for all your hard work.
And the people on the call, you're welcome to use your reaction buttons and give these people a round of applause by doing the clapping.
I want to echo that. Thank you, Lisa, just delivered, but also encourage registrants out there to contact Lisa if you're interested in serving on committees. We have a number, as was stated earlier. They do important work in the college, and your signing up is first and foremost service back to your profession. It's service to the public, and obviously it's also a great way to learn more about the college and about the work that the college does.
Yeah, and really the committees are where the work happens. That's where the nitty-gritty work goes into everything that that the board sets as their strategic direction. We use the committees to do a lot of that work. And it is a good way to, if you're thinking you might be interested in the board at some point in time, a committee first is actually a really good way to get some experience and find out what is involved.
Yep, well said. Okay, I get the pleasure of thanking two of the people on this list. Raj Mann was not able to attend today's meeting. She's working. She's involved in teaching. And on behalf of you as the registrants and on behalf of the board, we do want to just acknowledge the good work that Raj has done over her term. She has been a very dedicated mom and has found the balance between the work of the board and being a mom as a great example of what giving back to the association means. It means balancing that work and the family, but Raj has certainly been someone who has been invested and involved in committee work as well as in the board, and we thank her for the 3 years that she has spent both on the board and in the inquiry committee. The second name is Kim McEachern. Kim is on the board currently. You've seen her, you've met her. She's our treasurer. She's also our VP. So she wears 2 hats on the board this year. She is a dedicated member of the board. I've had the pleasure of working with her for a number of years. She is also involved in the registration committee where we also work together, and just an advocate for what is right and an advocate for her own profession, but certainly seeing her role as a professional invested in making sure that the public is well served by the profession is a tribute to all opticians. She is a tribute to your group, and your group is better because of her involvement. So thank you to Raj and thank you to Kim for your service over the last 3 years.
Okay, and I get to jump back on for the last. So all three of our current public appointees to the board are all finishing their first terms, either at the end of December or in January of 2021. We do not pick our public members. They are appointed through, it's called CABRO. It's a branch of the Ministry of Health that does this appointment process for us. So it's not something that we have a lot of control over. Our bylaws stipulate that we must have 1/3 public members currently. And as Peter noted, this is one of the changes that will be coming with the modernization report. We will have an increase in public representation. At the current time, with the size of our board, we are required to have 3 public appointees. So all 3 have requested reappointment, which is great. We are just waiting to hear back from government as to the reappointment process, but we are hopeful that we will have word on this before the end of the year when terms start to become up. Our public appointees bring a unique voice and perspective. It's far removed from that of those that are in the profession. And on behalf of the staff and the registrant board members, we value their input and rely on them to make sure we're focusing on public safety perspective of our work. All 3 have requested reappointment, as I mentioned, and we are very hopeful that this will happen soon.
Lisa, do you want to just read their name out in case anyone on the call can't see the video? I mean, see the share screen.
And that is Piotr Meszkowski, Peter Luongo, and Barbara Larkin.
And once again, you can use your clapping button in the reactions to give those people your appreciation. So I see some clapping happening. So I'm going to stop share and look at the questions. So there are a few questions in the chat. So someone has said that they prefer the voting rather than the idea of appointments. And another question was, and you may have already answered this, who chooses our representatives?
Well, the current process has the appointments of the public members made through CABRO, which is an arm of the provincial government, or at least acts on behalf of the provincial government. The representatives who are from the profession currently are voted in. And I can tell you that Lisa and I went through a process a year ago, Lisa, or 2 years ago, where we didn't have all elected positions filled. And so we did do some appointing. But typically, up until now, I've been involved with the board since about 2015. And they have been typically either professional appointed, professional voted, or appointed public members. And moving forward, it will be all appointed as per the recommendations of the steering committee. They will all be appointed positions, and the ratio of membership on the boards will change to increase the amount of public involvement.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
I could just speak to I believe you said the question was, or the comment was, that they preferred the thought of elections versus appointments. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I understand your thinking on that, but if you think about it truly from the perspective of what a regulator is supposed to do, the thought of an election where you choose somebody from your electoral district and you elect them to the board gives a sense of representation to you because you've elected them. And that's not how a regulatory college works. The people on the board do not represent you as the registrants. They represent the public and the public interest and public protection. So it gives a bit of a false sense of what that board member's role is if you're electing them versus if they're appointed based on their experience and competencies in relation to the work that a regulator has to do.
Okay, thank you. The other comment that's come into the chat is actually from, let me just enlarge my screen here, is actually from Claudia Rojas. She's saying that she welcomes any questions and extends her support to all registrants. Another question, hi Lisa, I wasn't able to hear at the beginning of the course. I did figure it out already. Thanks. Okay, and then somebody else is still saying they prefer voting over for their local representation. Any other questions? We're going to be bringing the meeting to a close shortly, so this is actually a time that you can ask questions on any of the topics that we have covered over the last hour and a half. And maybe while people are still thinking, I am going to launch one more poll.
Yep.
And
good.
to find out, this was our first time running this meeting virtually, and we want to find out which topics in the agenda today you found most useful. So pick your top 2, please. So we got about 50%, 60%. We'll just wait a bit more. We have about 70% response. Giving people a little bit of time to think and reflect. I usually do 80% or a minute, kind of which comes first. So I will end the polling now. And if you want to speak to the results, Peter.
Sure. The number one item at 73%, not too surprising here, Indigenous culture, safety, and humility presentation. The second largest votes went to amalgamation and changes to regulation. The third was COVID-19 update, and then we had complaint trends, which was seen as a benefit. And it rounded out with the announcements about upcoming elections and the auditor's report. So we and quality assurance update got 19% as well. So thank you, everybody. That actually is helpful information. I want to take a quick moment to thank Rita for facilitating today's event, the AGM. You did a great job on our behalf. I want to thank all those who presented today. And on behalf of the board and the staff, I want to thank each and every one of you who've taken part in today's presentation and come online and taken time with us. It's 1:58 and 31 seconds, which means we're just shy of 2 o'clock. Did you want to wait for any final questions, Rita?
We can. And just as people are logging off, I'm going to ask staff and board members to please stay on the call. So I just got someone saying thank you. Another person is saying thank you. So a couple of thank yous and appreciation.
Perfect.
Yep.
Well, at
Yeah,
this
thanks,
time
everyone.
then, at this time, I adjourn on behalf of the board. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of thanks. Thanks all. Thank you. A lot of thank you messages coming in. So for those that want to exit the meeting, there should be a button in the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting screen that allows you to leave the meeting. And as I said, if staff and board members could please stay on. So Jade is asking if you want her to stay on.
She certainly can for a minute if she would like to. I don't think I need to. Okay. Thank you, Jade, for everything.
And someone else said, really appreciate everyone coming and sharing their knowledge.
Rita, you've been able to save the polls or not?
Yeah, I can pull a poll report after.
I think it'd be really good to send that off to Chris and to Lisa for future planning and response. Some really good information there.
So Chris, I'm just going to ask you to help me because I think some people may have stepped away from their computer or they don't know how to log off this call. So if you can just go through the participant window, and then anyone that's not staff or board, you can probably put them back in the waiting room.
Sounds
or
good.
remove them.
Put in waiting room.
Rita, just so I'm clear, so I'm not needed anymore. Is that correct?
Unless you had any feedback you wanted to share.
Yeah, unless you had any comments, Jade, or info for us. Otherwise, I think we're good.
Okay. No, I don't have any feedback or comments. It was great. Honestly, everything is there's just so much detail in every part. So that was kind of inspiring, especially Victoria's presentation.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and near the end, Lisa, when you answered the question about the representatives for the public versus for the members or the registrants, that was very clear as well. So
okay, good.
That was awesome. Yeah, thank you
Good.
very much.
Yeah.